everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of ALTIUS Answers. We are super excited to be here today to share some information with you. And for those of you that are not familiar with ALTIUS Healthcare Consulting Group, our mission is to help community hospitals primarily through workforce optimization and productivity. So how do we do that? We're going to talk a little bit about that today. But furthermore, we're going to help you understand the keys to success. And just so you're aware, our mission is really to support the community hospitals of America, one hospital at a time, by improving performance. And we'll talk a little bit today about what does that mean and how you can make sure you have a successful engagement at your particular hospital. I'm excited today to be joined by RandiLynn Lukac. RandiLynn is our Chief Operating Officer, and I'll let her do a quick introduction of her experience, and then we're going to get rolling.
Well, hi everyone. I am RandiLynn Lukac, the COO of ALTIUS Healthcare Consulting Group. And I have been with the company for about 15 years. My main focus is on productivity, labor management, workforce optimization, and really partnering with our clients to drive success to their organizations.
So a lot of times, we are called into organizations when they've had situations that for whether it's months or years, their finances have been deteriorating or their quality has been deteriorating. And sometimes they're simply looking for a solution to a small problem that they need to fix. And we're often asked, what do we do? Where do we start? How do we know we need to begin? And how can we ensure that we're successful? Many times, our clients are really engaged and they're battling a history of failure. And they're battling previous consulting companies that have come in and tried to improve performance. They might be battling prior executives, strategies that worked and didn't work. So we're going to focus today on really helping you understand what are the keys to success and how can you ensure you have a successful consulting project or successful productivity engagement. RandiLynn and I really like to focus on workforce optimization. So we're going to talk a lot about that. And Randy, in your experiences, I know that we've worked with dozens of hospitals, probably hundreds of hospitals to this point. And a lot of times, the first question that we get asked is, who is our compare group? And we talk about the fact that we're shaking up this comparison group and, numbers are rolling out, but that's not at all how it works. So I just want to, help our listeners understand, where do the numbers come from? Mm-hmm. How can you ensure a successful peer group development? And what does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's this mystery around the peer group that brings some uneasiness to our clients or to productivity engagements in general. That black box, that mysterious black box where the numbers come from. But the importance of a peer group and the importance of the right peer group really comes down to finding peers that are similar in size, service, and structure that may be in a geographical range around your organization. But ultimately, we want strong performers. We want to see those organizations that have high financial performance, high quality performance, high patient satisfaction. It's not going to be successful if you sit there and you cherry pick the hospitals that you want to be compared to because you really like the things that organization is doing or the things that this organization is doing. You really want to use the data to drive the peer group. And that's what makes a successful peer group.
Absolutely. And oftentimes when we start to talk about a successful peer group and really looking at those high performers, some of our clients actually laugh and they're like, hey, we're not even going to be in our own comparison group.
It's true.
And that may in fact be true. And the whole reason that we're engaged is to help them actually elevate their performance and get into that comparison group. And there's nothing wrong with the fact that you may not be in your initial comparison group because you're looking at high performing, functioning organizations.
Yep, definitely. And one thing that we have heard questions from some of our clients is, why do we remove the poor performers? Well, we want to move in the direction of high performance. We want to drive cost savings to the bottom line. If we're comparing you to poor performers, well, then we might be going backwards. And it doesn't invalidate anything. It doesn't make it a wrong peer group by taking out the poor performers. It just elevates the group that you're being compared to.
Exactly. And so number one key to success is have a comparison group that makes sense for your facility, your hospital. If you're critical access, make sure the comparison group are critical access facilities. If you are a short-term acute care facility, include those. If you're a safety net hospital, include those. Have it be as exact as possible. Now, once you develop that comparison group and you know that you're going to do something, the next step often is, where do we start? And a lot of times, organizations want to start small. We may want to, let's only do a trial run and let's see if we can do this in the laboratory, or maybe let's trial this with just the radiology group, or we don't want to hurt our patient care areas, so let's focus only on overhead, or we don't want to upset the administrative functions and we don't want to upset the overhead functions, so let's only focus on the patient care areas. How, can we combat that? What is the right reason? And, let's talk a little bit about what happens when you exclude departments.
So if you exclude a department, then you're ultimately not measuring or managing all of your FTEs. So right off the bat, if you are excluding administrative cost centers, or if you're excluding certain areas within the organization, we don't have a true picture of the impact on your labor cost. So we tend to forget about them, right? Because we have fixed them, and so then we don't focus on them. But if the organization is moving in a direction either growing or volume is declining, those fixed areas are impacted by that volume, and they need to be managed and to be measured, and they need to be included. You can't exclude anyone, because then it's not equitable across the organization. And then that creates the finger pointing, right? So
Yep.
Why don't they have to have a target, or why do I have to have a target? And it really doesn't create a cohesive and a comprehensive engagement that ultimately drives success.
Absolutely. So rule to success number 2 is include everyone. If you want to make rapid change within your organization, you have to include all departments, and all departments have to be treated equitably, because that's the only way to move the organization, forward. And as you're working through this, you're going to decide, how are we going to measure these departments? So once we know that we're including everyone, we know that we have the comparison group, what do we do next to actually move things forward? So we have to decide, how are we going to actually measure success? And a lot of different departments might have different workload unit activities. When you're dealing with the operating room, you're going to have cases. You're going to actually have the amount of time that it takes within the operating room to perform that case. You might be looking at revenue. Ultimately, how do you determine the right workload unit for an actual individual department? How do you choose what we are measured on?
Well, I think that's a really important question. And when you think about the volume within your department and you think about what you're doing, so if it's a patient care area, what's the main function of your department? Patient care. It's the patient days. It's kind of that heads in the bed. How many patients do we have? What's our census? And of course, there's a lot of other things that might happen during that patient day experience. They might be transported down to the cath lab or to an MRI. And yes, so transport is part of it. There's passing trays. Who's passing the trays? So there's all of these little things that add up to the overall day-to-day operations, but it's really finding the most representative workload unit or volume for that department. And the OR is a great example. You brought that up. And when you look at OR cases, sure, that tells us how many patients we're seeing. How many cases did we have in the OR? And it helps with booking your ORs for OR utilization, knowing the cases. And using cases is good. It's a good workload unit, but it's not the best workload unit.
Yeah.
And so really moving from a good workload unit to a best workload unit would be using hours within the OR. So now we know how long we're in the OR. What's the severity of the case? What's the acuity? How many individuals do I have in the OR for that one single hour? And you can really relate that to the manager or the director of the OR, because now they can understand, I have 2 people in the OR. They're in there for an hour. That's 2 hours per 1 OR hour. So now I have to add turnover in. And so you can really build the hour per workload unit with the manager or the director to help them understand, because it's the best workload unit for the department.
And building off of that a little bit, when you're talking about an operating room, one of the questions that we're often asked is, that's only one piece of the work that I do. What happens before those patients are in the operating room? What's happening after it? And the thing to keep in mind is that there is all of the work that takes place before the patient actually hits that operating room. So there's the scheduling of the patient, there's the ordering of the slides and supplies. All of that is included in that hour per operating room hour. So it's a cohesive benchmark. But keep in mind that other hospitals also have that activity, because 90% of hospitals are doing the exact same things as you are. And it's understanding that and the fact that there are going to be those small deviations. So now we have the strong workload unit, and we know what our benchmarks are. Sometimes executive teams get a little bit stuck with how to determine targets. And one of the things that we're often said is that we're just going to put everyone at best practice. or let's just put everyone at better performing, or we like being average. We really enjoy being average, so we're going to set the median as our target for everyone across the organization. What are the problems whenever, someone says, hey, set everything at the 75th percentile or set everyone at the same goal? How can that really derail an organization, and what's a key to success for that?
Well, I think when you start with your baseline analysis and your historical analysis, you really have an understanding of where everybody is starting. So if everybody is starting at a different place, at a different percentile, then we can't expect them all to go to the 75th. If I'm performing at the 70th, the 75th, well, it's not that far away from me. But if you're performing below the median, and you're at the 40th percentile,
heck no, there's no way I'm going to get there.
It's a huge jump. It's a huge jump, and that's just defeat automatically for that manager. So when you think about productivity and you think about making change, there's really an emotional factor that comes with it when you're talking to the managers, because they love their department. They love their staff. They're working hard. Nobody's not working hard, right? So then when you tell them you're below the median and you need to be at the 75th percentile, it's immediate defeat. And then they kind of ignore their target because it's too much of a gap.
Right, because I care about the organization. I've been committed. I've made changes that I thought were going to help. I come to work. I do what I think is best for our employees. I absolutely want to have high quality care, but yet you're telling me basically that I'm horrible. And you're also giving me a target where I have to improve by an amount that I just can't seem to stretch through, and I definitely can't figure it out.
And it's much easier to make small, steady steps. So if we're going to look at target changes or goals based off of your baseline or historical performance compared to your peers, we want to take small steps. So we like to use a decision rule. And that decision rule could possibly be, if you're below the median, we're going to give you a 10% improvement, because 10% is something that's manageable. We can accomplish that, and we can accomplish it together, right? So we're going to partner with those managers, those directors, and help them understand how to make those changes, small and steady changes, 1 month after, the next after the next. If you're performing below the 75th percentile, a 5% improvement is probably reasonable, realistic, and achievable. And then for those that are better than the 75th or below the 90th percentile or best practice, maybe a 2.5% improvement is appropriate for them.
So the fourth key to success, manageable goals and setting expectations on a decision rule that's going to make sense for all departments. So key to success number 5 involves, what do you do to make sure that these goals for productivity, workforce optimization are linked to your strategic plan and linked to the overall organization goals? And one of the areas that we find often is that there's misalignment between strategies and targets. And so you have a strategic plan that everyone's working to achieve, to grow services, to maybe build the orthopedic service line, to build the cardio service line, to add, external rural clinics. But yet over here, we have productivity targets that aren't necessarily supporting this goal. And, one of the things that we find is a key to success is making sure that your budget is linked to your strategy, which are linked to your targets. So what are the ways that organizations can help to align those?
Well, I think using their volume adjusted targets to develop their budget is one way to start that process. So rather than saying, I'm going to budget how I budgeted last year, which we know that happens.
Blow up the budget.
We know everybody does that, right? But instead, using your productivity reports or your productivity targets to have a volume adjusted target or budgeted FTE. So you're using that target percentile that you're set at, you're using your budgeted volume, and then you're developing your budgeted FTE from that. That's one way to start that link. Now, when you're talking about strategic initiatives or internal goals, like service line goals, you then have to take a look and say, okay, if I need to be at 80% satisfaction for maybe my call center, how do I align that with my productivity target?
Absolutely.
Because I can't be necessarily at the 90th for my efficiency and my productivity and hit that 80% service goal. I might need to be at the 65th percentile in order to achieve that goal.
Everything has to be balanced. And if this is working correctly, you won't find yourself in a situation where you're sitting across from your board and you're looking at a balance sheet that has a negative 4% operating margin or a negative 3% operating margin. And then you get to the next part of your board presentation. You're like, but we're okay because our productivity efficiency is 90%. great job, we're doing well, losing money, productivity is good. It can't be that way. If you're losing money, there's something on workforce optimization that has to change. Your targets need to be in line with what you're doing here, and these two need to work together. So now that you have a budget that is supported with your overall targets and everything's aligned there, and you know that if you're making money, you're going to hit your productivity targets, vice versa, they're supporting your strategy. What do you need to do to update the comparisons? Some of our longstanding jokes are we'll walk into organizations and we sit down and ask, when did you actually come up with these targets? Where are they from? Well, I worked at a hospital, several years back in Florida. It's a completely different state, and their average daily census is about half what ours is now. But I figured I would just bring these to the organization that I'm with now, and they might be 10 years old, but we just use them here. Or we had a consulting company that was in here a few years ago, and they gave us targets, and we implemented those. And every year we make changes to them, but mostly they're just the same targets that they were. Or the worst is we accessed a database 10 years ago, and those are the targets that we have, and we're still using those. Has anything changed in healthcare over the last 10 years? How often should targets be updated realistically?
Well, that's a great question. And I kind of have two-part answer for that. So one is targets and benchmarks, two different things, right? So when you're talking about benchmarks, your benchmarks, I would say updating them every 2 to 3 years is appropriate. I think that gives you current information against your peers, against the market. So your benchmarks, I think, every 2 to 3 years is appropriate for your benchmarks. Sure. If you want to update them every year, that's great. I think that's definitely kind of that high achiever, that best practice would be updating your benchmarks every year. But as far as your targets, now your targets need to be in line with your strategies. They need to be in line with your budget. So again, update targets annually with your budget process. However, if you are in a situation where you need to make change fast, maybe those targets need to update every quarter. So we're on a realization schedule. We have an end goal in mind, and every quarter we're updating our targets so that we're moving towards the end goal.
That's great advice, because what happens if I'm able to improve faster than I initially thought that I could? And I've already beat that initial target, and I'm only 3 months into the current fiscal year, but yet I'm still below the median.
Yeah.
So that gives us the opportunity to adjust targets quarterly, look at what that end realization goal is, and just continue to move towards that performance improvement opportunity.
And another thing with targets, organizations change daily. Operations change daily. So if I'm a department head, I'm a director, I'm a manager, and somebody's coming into my department. They're coming out of your department, let's say. So you're a fellow director, and you're giving me one of your FTEs. Now, targets need to change for both of us. It doesn't just instantly improve your productivity. Hey, I gave her one of my FTEs, and it doesn't just instantly make my performance.
You mean I just can't shift my poor performance to you?
No, I don't want it. So we do have to change targets then. So when things change within the organization, we have to change targets. And that's one thing we always tell our clients. We don't know what we don't know. So don't hold on to those changes and not tell us about them. It's really important to keep your targets current with your operations.
Yeah, that is so important. So, rule to success number 6, make sure that you're updating your targets consistently and at least updating your comparisons every 2 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. So we have this beautiful biweekly reporting system. We have great targets in place that we're updating as realistically as we can, as often as we can. We have biweekly reports going out to our managers. We have information that we're sharing with our board. How do I hold people accountable? I have all these great things, but what do I do with it?
I think there's a lot of ways you can address accountability. One is making sure you as a senior leader know where everybody is performing that reports up to you. So the first thing is to hold yourself accountable to review those reports and act on them and communicate to your leaders that you are reviewing them and you see what's happening with their performance. One option is to track low efficiency rates, let's say, or negative variances. So if you're below a 95% efficiency rate for 3 pay periods in a row, well, that's 6 weeks of poor performance. So maybe we flag you around the second pay period there in that trend. And then the third, now we've got to have an action plan. Now we need to know the steps that we're going to do to reverse the trend that we're on. 1 pay period doesn't make a trend. It's 2 weeks. By that second pay period, we're 4 weeks in. Maybe we're onto something here. If we're going in the wrong direction. Third pay period, we definitely need to take action. We're 6 weeks in. We're moving into the week 7 and 8 of it, and we really do need to make sure that an action plan is in place.
So a rule to success here is to build out that accountability structure that gives you an easy way to know if a department's hitting their goal or not, and then helping to hold the managers accountable. So the efficiency rate is really a calculation that says you're hitting your goal or you're not hitting your goal. If you're at 100%, you hit that goal, or you're 105%, you've already surpassed it. So you can quickly look at it and know, yes, we hit that target. We're doing well. Everything's in place. But if it's below 100%, now you need that call to action.
Yep.
And that's where a great accountability structure can come in, where the managers are expected to provide their basically roadmap to repair. And what are they going to do to actually get back on track with success? What step are they taking this week and this month? And what steps are they going to take next month to really build that out? And 3 to 4 pay periods, that's a trend that needs to be corrected. And that should trigger something for an accountability structure to improve upon.
Another option is to implement a position control committee. And this is where you would bring together some leaders within your organization. We went representatives from HR, from the clinical area, finance, operations, where they are going to review the positions that are requested. So you have open positions, and how many organizations out there have way too many open positions? Way more open positions than they need for their volume and for their organization. It happens. It's out there.
And when those open positions have been open for 2 years, 3 years, even 1 year, maybe we need to revisit it.
I would scratch those. I would definitely scratch those. Maybe start over. But that position control committee can really start to manage the requests. And it also helps the managers be accountable to their target and to their efficiency rate. So if I'm below the median and I have a negative variance, I'm not hitting my target, I have a low efficiency rate, I should know better than to go to the position control committee, right? I shouldn't take my request to you. It happens. I'm sure it happens. But, it really helps to educate the managers on when it's appropriate to request that position. Because gone are the days where we just can stamp yes on all of these requests. We can't afford to do that in today's environment.
Yeah, in today's healthcare environment, gone are the days of just stamping the yes, and gone are the days of the static budget.
Yep.
Where every single year, no matter what department you were in, you needed more FTEs, you needed more people, no matter what, you always needed more. And with the change in reimbursement and the change in the cost structure and the workforce shortages, it just doesn't work anymore. So next step is, how do we make sure that we optimize everything and we really focus in on the most important key to success, which is in buy-in? Because realistically, if the managers don't trust the numbers, if the managers don't believe the comparisons, if they don't believe that the targets are appropriate or everything's moving in the right direction or this is the best thing for the organization, no one's going to make any change. So what can happen, or how can you actually build the buy-in, and what steps can be taken there?
Well, I think when you think about buy-in, first off, when you think about productivity, it's immediately a scary word, right? Everybody's afraid of productivity. It's so scary. I personally think productivity is great. I think it's great to be productive. I think it's great to improve upon what you're doing. Obviously, that's why we're in the business we're in.
Because who comes to work a day and says, you know what, I don't want to be productive today.
I'm going to do nothing today. Productivity is a good thing, and it's great to be productive. It's great to have a culture centered around productivity and accountability. But buying in is hard. And it really starts with building the rapport with the managers and helping the managers understand the why behind why we're doing this. Why is productivity important? And why is it important to you and important to me and important to our peers within the organization? And then showing them ways to success, showing them how best practices can improve their organization, and really guiding them. That helps with the buy-in. There's always going to be data denial, so we've got to get over that fast. All right, stop denying the numbers. Stop denying that other people are doing it better than you, because it's out there and it's happening, and we can all improve our operations. But really getting past that resistance and kind of, rather than using fear to implement productivity, trying to use compassion and understanding to educate and elevate those managers who may know nothing about productivity, and kind of taking that fear aspect out of it and using education and tools to bring everybody together.
I think compassion is so important anytime that you're trying to influence change and behavior, because ultimately we're all people and people have emotions. So in order to actually influence change, build the rapport, there needs to be compassion and there needs to be empathy, because you want to do the best for our patients. We want to make sure they have a high quality experience. We want to make sure that they have strong patient care. And how can I do that unless there's compassion for the actual person performing that care? So everything starts with the employees.
Yeah, absolutely.
On making sure you have an accountability model. What are some final words of advice that you might have to, our clients and or anyone within the healthcare space that knows they have to make change with workforce optimization or productivity, and what should they do, to just get started? Or what are your final words of advice?
Well, I think first off, ultimately, productivity will produce positive results. It's going to. That's the nature of productivity, and it spreads. And so you have these positive results, it builds momentum and leads to the next and leads to the next. And you can use those strong performers within productivity to mentor or coach the other, leaders that might be struggling and might need a little bit of assistance. But I think that, a piece of advice that I would give to our clients or to other organizations out there is, your labor cost is a big part of your expense. And if you aren't managing it today, you need to manage it tomorrow. And really implementing a culture around accountability and productivity is the only way you're going to manage your labor cost. And, because I absolutely hate to see layoffs or RIFs or worst case scenario closures. That's the last thing I want to see, are community hospitals closing. It's happening too much as we sit here today. We're losing too many of our community hospitals. And maybe, just maybe, there were things that they could have done with their labor that maybe would have prevented it or delayed it or something to keep that open within their community. And so focusing in, making small changes. It doesn't have to be a big change. We don't have to completely reinvent the wheel. But if we focus in on workforce optimization and changing something small every single day,
we'll get that momentum moving and keep the ball going.
We'll get there. Yeah.
It is very heartbreaking. There have been a lot of notices recently about closures within community hospitals. And I think you touched upon so many great nuggets of information there. Number one, just start. Just pick something that you can improve and just start. Get the momentum rolling, and then reward and recognize your employees and those stars that have done something, so that other people want to also make progress and make improvements and keep that train moving forward. And the thing that I think is, so remarkable, especially like with our clients, whenever their back's up against the wall and they think they actually absolutely have no future and they don't know what they're going to do, when they start making just little tiny small changes, whether it's eliminating overtime in a department or eliminating one shift or just opening a clinic an hour earlier so patients can get there before they go to work, staying open an hour later, those small changes start to build momentum and momentum and change and action and momentum. And before they know it, they've gone from a negative operating margin to zero operating margin to +3. So it's not huge changes. It's those little small tweaks.
Yeah, I mean, think about our client a few years back in the Midwest, 4-hospital system, and they didn't want to implement a huge productivity push. Yeah. They just wanted to know where they stood against their peers, and they wanted to monitor their performance. Financially, they were okay. They were ahead of the curve with implementing productivity in a system, but they really just wanted to shine a light on it. And in 6 months, they saved $9 million just by shining a light on productivity and holding people accountable to a target. They didn't do massive action plans. They didn't do massive change or wide sweeping change. They really just asked people to focus in on hitting their hour per workload unit. The targets were set appropriately. The managers had buy-in, and they had success, fast success. I mean, I think that's a great example of just starting and shining a light on it.
Just start, shine a light on it, and really focus in on those keys to success. And there are great best practice success stories and information out there on departments and things that you can do. And the easiest thing is to just start improving. So with that, I hope you've really appreciated the 8 keys to success that we've shared today and ways that you can make sure that you have a very successful workforce optimization and productivity engagement. And more importantly, help your healthcare entity, organization, surgical service suite, hospital, healthcare system improve step by step over time so that you still keep your doors open and continue to serve your community. Thank you all for listening. Please be sure to subscribe to ALTIUS Answers and also look for us on LinkedIn and Facebook. We'll be coming to you live every week, and we look forward to sharing more information and knowledge with you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you for listening to the ALTIUS Answers podcast. For more information on anything you've heard today, please search for ALTIUS on LinkedIn or Facebook, or visit us at our website, www.altiushcg.com. That's www.altiushcg.com. Once again, thanks for listening. We hope to see you again in the future.